Okay. All right, well... well, now my video feed's not working. Alright, well, anyways, fuck it. It's not important. The video feeds are all fucked up. I don't know if anyone's watching right now, but the audio is working, and that's the most important part of this. So we're just gonna hop along, and if the video looks fucked up to you, that's why. So Andy, you're not even showing up at all.
And, you know,
Jason,
like
you're frozen in place.
Good look for me. It really highlights my natural features and the best.
Oh, there you go. Jason's moving.
I'm rocking it. I love it. All about it.
Okay. Well,
so mine seems to be about 7 seconds behind.
Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah, so it's not going to track my words very well, but I don't care.
No, it'll track your words. But yeah. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Let's see. So, anyways, so another like really fucked up beginning to one of the podcast things, or trying to do the live stream. To be honest, I don't know. I'm a little bit frustrated with the setup of like trying to get the videos, the live stream thing going. So we might just record this like a normal podcast in the future. We'll see. Lots of technical issues today. So anyways.
Don't get discouraged. One minor hiccup.
Minor hiccup, yeah. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, the audio is the most important part for now, and that is working, so we can go on with the show. Welcome, everyone, that's listening to the Squat the Planet podcast. Today we are going to get to know one of our best and frankly I think most interesting members of the forums that we have, Jason. He goes by Eng Jr Lupo on the forums, and he's joining us today, and we're gonna have a little chat, get to know him a little bit, and I hope to have this be part of a series that we're gonna be doing on various different travelers, where we just like get to know who they are, where they came from, all that kind of good stuff, like how they're involved in traveling and whatnot. And, you know, just get like a series of personal stories, you know, where we can kind of get to know these travelers. And everyone's got an interesting story to tell. So today we're going to hear from Jason and talk with him about some of his experiences in life in general, and traveling, and some training stuff too. So Jason, also I am joined also by, I should announce this since we don't have video feeds, I'm joined by Andy, who goes by Ephemeral Stick on the forums.
I'm there.
So Andy, Jason, welcome both to the second episode. Thank you guys for joining me here again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So like I said, today, Jason, we're going to talk about you. We're going to put the spotlight on you and hopefully not interrogate you too much.
Okay.
So Jason, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you know, what do you do, like how'd you get to here in life, and you know, I think it's one of your jobs that former jobs that you're talking about is pretty interesting. So I don't know if you want to touch on that. Maybe just give us a brief introduction about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm all thrown off. So you want me to start with just an introduction about myself? I'm 43 years old. I live in Central California. I'm a former locomotive engineer for a major Class 1 railroad. out of Roseville, so that probably answers which one. And conductor, switchman, I worked all the different positions pretty much. Fireman, remote control, locomotive operator, yeah, everything like from bottom to top as far as transportation. And then I started traveling with the riders and kind of switched up my careers a little bit. And I'm not doing that anymore. But yeah, I don't know. I rode while being an employee. I also would hop freight trains for a while. So there was like a little bit of crossover and some kind of fun stories that I have to tell, I guess, from that era.
Cool. So how did you get to become a train engineer? Like, how did that happen?
Okay, so this was like in 2003. I had like a whole number of jobs that I used to work. You know, I never really stayed at one place for all that long, and happened to be working at this. It was like an insurance company. They handled like workers' comp claims, and I just worked in the mailroom. So I was just kind of like taking in and sending out packages and things, and I didn't really dig that job too much. But the route to work was along this diagonal road. It kind of like saved me time, and it just so happened to be Weber Avenue, which runs parallel to the yard here in town. And so I would always see the railroad activity going on and whatnot. And I just got thinking about it one day, like, I wonder like how that is. And so I dropped it. The car department actually. So not really the department that I ended up working for, but I dropped into the car department and I asked the guys, and they said just apply online. And so I did, and then it was like probably almost, I don't know, it was like 7-8 months later. So it was a long time afterwards. I had completely forgot that I even applied, and I had a call on the answering machine to me from the railroad, and I had completely forgotten. And I was just like, oh my god, like, did I run a crossing? Like, what the hell? Like, are they calling? And I called them back, and then they said, you know, well, we'd like to invite you to a hiring session, and so that was cool. I showed up. There were about 200 people the first day. I think about 150 the second day. And of the 350 plus, they hired 3 of us. So that I didn't know if I should really go with it or not, but I felt like the odds that the fact that I made it, out of 350 seemed like maybe I should like ride this out. But it didn't really seem like they picked. Not trying to claim like that, like I'm anything special. Like one of the other kids was like a cook in a casino here. You know what I mean? He was 18 years old and he had no work experience at all. So I don't know how they chose us, honestly. No telling. But at any rate, I'm sorry, they hired 4 of us. I'm sorry. There was 3 from one day and 1 from the next day. So there's 4 of us. But at any rate, jumped through a very small hoop there and figured maybe I should check this out. Didn't have any idea what the railroad is about, but I decided to quit the office job and check it out. So they sent me to Bakersfield to do brakeman's training classes. That's like the first step that you do whenever you work the railroad. Even if you're going to be a conductor, you start out going through brakeman and training classes. And so that was like a 3-week process, and that was kind of a shock because my study habits were terrible even in high school. I dropped out in like 10th grade, or I got kicked out, and never went back to school. Terrible study habits. So to be handed this G Corps, I don't know if you've ever seen the G Corps, but it's a massive book, and they said, well, you're gonna basically memorize that whole book, and you're gonna be tested on all of it like in the next 3 weeks, basically. So that was really hard, and you had to get 85% or better. If you missed 85% on a test, you had one more chance to pass it. You had to come in on a weekend, and if you didn't pass it, then you were just gone. Chance. So
did you ever have to retake a test?
you would have to retake the test if you didn't. Yeah, if you didn't pass, you had one more chance.
You have to did you ever?
Oh, I never had to. I never had to. No, I lucked out. I got really close on one.
That doesn't sound like luck. Like, that sounds impressive.
The air brake test was the hardest, and I know that I squeaked by. I must have got like 86 or something. It was close.
Hey, it's better than all of I did in high school. Like 86, I would have dreamed to get.
I did terrible in high school. That was what was, but this, I mean, they were paying me for this, so it was like I had a little more motivation, a little more interest, So, but it was really hard because you don't really know what like they're talking about knuckles and air hoses and all these things, and you're just kind of like guessing at what this even is or how it applies. You don't know anything. Signal systems, super confusing whenever they're just telling you about it out of a book. So it was really hard to study.
No, but do you know about it now?
What's that?
Like all the systems and everything. Do you know about all the systems and the things that you were tested on like fluently now?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
After like, okay,
yeah,
totally.
I think it's a huge help as far as hopping freight to know, what signals mean, what the I know what the engineer's doing, and whenever I hear a 20-pound set or a 10-pound set, like I know what the difference is between what he's doing. There's a lot of things that I think where that training really helped me, in other ways beyond just working for the railroad. But I guess getting back to that, that was 3 weeks, and then they sent us out on the job training, and we kind of just married up to crews. They would send us with the crew for a week, and I'm dragging this out, huh?
No, you're fine.
No, not at all.
So, it was
it's
just
your story. We want to hear it.
Yeah, so a few months of doing that, just on the job training with different crews, met a lot of interesting characters, a lot of grumpy old men, a lot of really cool cats. It was an interesting time, and then after a while, they just cut you loose, and they make you I started out as a remote control locomotive operator, so I came back to the town that I hired on, which is Fresno, California, and I would work in the yards and basically switch cars. So you had a little belt pack on your stomach. It was like almost like a fanny pack, but it had remote controls on it, and you control the locomotive with that, and you kind of like run alongside the locomotive, and then pull the pin on, or not beside the locomotive. I'm sorry, run alongside the cars, the locomotive pushing, and then pull the pin at some point, and then hit the brakes on the locomotive. And then it would stop, and all those cars would stop, and then cars would just roll free down the rail and just kick cars that way and build like smaller trains. And did that for a while, but it was it just didn't pay like the best, Like I knew that working on the road paid better. So then and regardless, you can only do that for so long anyway. You have to go to conductor's class. You have to at least be a conductor, or conductor qualified. So they sent us to conductor's class after that, and then we did on-the-job trips, to Dunsmuir and Reno and Oakland and all these different places.
Now, when you say like they give you working trips, like they just put you up in like the train, or did you have like hotels that you could go to and like the destinations that you were ending up in, or how did all that work?
Your video is back, by the way, Andy. Which is,
yeah, I managed to fix it while you guys were talking.
Nice. We're a little behind still, I think, with the actual timing of it, but we're here. So to answer the question, they would always put you up in hotels. Pretty decent places for the most part. There were a few hotels. The one in West Colton we called Dirty Harry's. It was actually like a Best Western or something, but we called it Dirty Harry's. It was dirty. They would give you the remote under a bulletproof glass, like sliding. There was like a big window, and they would like slide this remote to you under it. So I guess people were stealing their remotes, and they needed bulletproof glass. So it was like really shady there.
Wow. Do they rent by the hour?
Oh my god!
I bet they did. I bet it was a place that rented by the hour. I mean, I never really.
Dude,
it was
the
pretty
best places do. It's just more convenient that way. Let's be honest.
Well, Jason, how many hours? I mean, not hours. Now you got me on the hourly thing. How many years did you work on the railroad?
It was about 5. Yeah, it was about 5. I did the conductor portion. I worked Bakersfield to West Colton in LA, and I would sleep in my car in Bakersfield. I still lived in Fresno, and so I would they give you an hour and a half to be to work, and it takes like an hour and 45 to get to Bakersfield. So I would usually leave early whenever I thought I was going to get called, and sometimes I wouldn't get called, and I'd make it all the way to Bakersfield, and then it was like, oh, this is terrible, because whenever they do call me, I'm still going to have an hour and a half before I'm supposed to be here, and I would already be at the yard office. And sometimes, man, I would really just not call. I would not play that right, and I would sit there for a few hours and just sleep in my car and wait. And so that got kind of old. And I decided, I actually working as a conductor like that. I did that for maybe 8 months or something, and then I decided that I wanted to be an engineer. Because the thing is when you're in a crew, if one person in the crew makes a mistake, the whole crew's fired. It's a union job, so you obviously can get your job back, but if it happens 2 or 3 times, then you get put on like this. Well, 2 or 3 times, I mean, eventually you're just fired. So it's kind of like you don't want to start accruing those, and that left me a little uncomfortable. I didn't want to get fired for somebody else's mistake, and it seemed like the people that made the most mistakes were the people that got most people fired were the engineers, because they're the ones running the train. They're going past red signals, that'll get you fired, things like that, or they were blowing hot, they were taking the breathalyzer or piss test and getting dirty results. That was actually individual. That wouldn't get the whole crew fired.
Hot. Love it.
I can imagine someone drunk off their ass trying to drive a bajillion-pound freight train.
I did it a couple times whenever we caught those Reno trips. There was one time so whenever I was a brakeman in training working in Fresno, they paired us up. Remember I said sometimes it was grumpy old men. Well, they paired me up with this guy named Gary Stagno, and I don't remember the other guy's name, but Gary was a fucking dick, and he was a real asshole. We were out on the short train, and I really didn't. Yeah, we didn't hit it off. Didn't like each other. Well, then it turns out that he went up to Roseville and became an engineer, and then I went up not long after and became an engineer too. And so we ended up in Reno together on a trip where I think I was the engineer right behind him or whatever, and so whenever we got to the hotel or whatever, we just happened to be checking in at the same time, and he was like, "What's up? Do you want to go have drinks?" And I don't like not getting along with people, so even if he was an asshole, I would still rather have an opportunity to be cool with them. So we went out drinking, and we got our calls to go to work when we were still in the bar. So we must have been in the bar, probably 8 hours or something like that. Or one of the bars that we went to, we were out all night, and we got the calls when we were at the bar, you're gonna run these trains down the mountain. And I think he got the worst of the two. I think he got a big nasty grain train. I think we both got grain trains, but mine was a little more forgiving.
Now, why are those bad?
They're heavy. They're 15,000 tons, and it's pretty much the heaviest trains that you're going to get going down that mountain. And just controlling trains down that mountain is really hard anyway. There's a lot of it's work, running flatland in the valley or something. You could get somebody doing it in 2 minutes. Teach them how to feather the throttle back and forth. It's super easy, but down the mountain it's a lot of work to balance the dynamic brakes and the air brakes, and then not come to a stop, because then you're fucked. So you have to it's really tricky. You can't piss away your air. It's really difficult.
So trying to do that drunk is a bad idea.
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying to me.
It was brutal. So I didn't also, I didn't want to get fired, so I didn't really do that a whole lot. But there were a couple occasions, yeah, and there were other, that was a really bad spot, Reno, for people, because they just had a hard time staying out of the bars or the casinos after they would get off work, and so they would always. It was pretty frequent that you'd see the person with the breathalyzer test down there at the yard office, ready to catch somebody,
Maybe, I don't know if people ask you this regularly, but what have you seen anything like really crazy while you're out driving a train somewhere, like in the middle of nowhere or something?
Really crazy. I didn't really prepare for this question. I don't know.
Well, for example, like one time when I was hopping trains down from Klamath Falls to Roseville, like up near the Shasta area, we saw a dead bear next to the tracks. And that was pretty cool. I mean, not cool for the bear, obviously, but like we're just like, holy shit, it's a fucking bear, and it's dead next to the tracks. It obviously been hit by the train or something, I don't know if you've seen anything on par with that,
We lost this troll, apparently. I guess he wanted to hear audience questions and not crazy trucker stories.
Oh, whatever. I'm not concerned about random YouTube chat.
So yeah, plenty of dead bears and whatnot. That was definitely
a pretty frequent occurrence.
Yeah, I think did I tell this story? I just told it the other day and on the website, but I'll just go over it again because this isn't the website.
Please do.
Yeah, we were. At this point I was a conductor in training, so I had an actual conductor that was training me. So I would kind of like stick by him at all times. And we were going up to Reno on one of these trips, and it was nighttime. It was snowing, and we had just went through Shed 10, which is Norden. I don't know, it's somewhere in the middle, kind of. And it's before Truckee. And the engineer said, I think he said, "There's a bear" or whatever, and so we like looked or whatever, and it was dead. It was on the side, like maybe a train hit it or something, or maybe it just died there. But like less than a minute after that, the train goes into emergency, and which means that it sets up its own emergency air brake application to all the cars or whatever. It stops on its own. So something's wrong. And so the engineer can't get the air back on the Fred, and so he says, "Well, I guess you guys gotta like walk the train." So the conductor and I are walking the train in the snow at night, and I just got bear on my mind. I'm just like, oh my god, like I'm gonna be fucking bear right now, for sure. And I had the air hose, and the conductor had the red wrench. You guys are familiar with the red wrench, I bet. Anyway, after a while, the air hose got a little heavier. I just got tired of holding it, and so I laced it behind my overalls, like basically across the small of my back, and it stuck out on both sides of my overalls. It kind of like laid across the part where the buttons are on the sides, and it stuck out. Rubber air hose. They're about 3.5 feet long, and we're just walking the train, and looking for the air leaks or whatever, thinking about bears, and couldn't get my mind off it. Yeah, just couldn't get my mind off the bears. And then at some point, my hand goes back, and I feel a moist, wet, kind of like in my mind right then when it hit. It was like this part of my hand. Whenever it hit, whatever it was, it was like, that's a bear's nose. That's what my mind did. It just went, that's a bear's nose. And I just screamed and like darted as fast as I could. And just running, like I thought I was going to die. And then I heard the conductor laughing.
Look behind you?
I don't think you do that whenever you think that there's a bear.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would run like
whenever
fuck
I
too,
think
man.
There's a bear behind me. I'm just saying, whenever I think there's a bear behind me, I will always look because that sounds like a great night.
Rim
wow.
shot.
You open the door. Be rude for me not to walk through.
So I didn't look. I just ran, and my hand started hitting the rubber air hose that was behind, laced behind my nose there, and it was wet. It was moist from the snow, and the conductor's back there laughing, and I just kind of put it together, like what that was. It wasn't there at all. So, yeah, there's lots of animals, man. Cows stink more than anything else. I guess you wouldn't think that, but they do. You don't want to hit a cow. I relieved a lot of trains that had hit people. I only hit one person myself, and not with the front end. It was the person I got was in Hayward, and he tried to run and jump in front of the train, but I just stayed notched up in throttle, going the speed because it didn't look like he was going to make it. But I could tell that he was trying to. Yeah, it didn't look like he was trying to beat the train. It looked like he was trying to die. You could just see it in his eyes. It was crazy. And and we got past the intersection just before he made it to to get in front of us. And so that was a real big relief. But then I guess he was so set on doing it that afterwards, after a few cars went by, he just grabbed the rail and pulled his head over one of the rails between the wheel sets and took his head off. And
whoa.
So the people at the crossing called and made us go back and see if we could help him out or whatever. So they're crazy.
Can you help this headless guy? Well, you probably didn't know he was headless at that point, right?
Yeah, no, you don't have much details.
Yeah, that's gotta suck though still.
Yeah.
Beyond suck, that's fucking traumatic. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Right. We didn't get days off for that, which is kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I heard, a friend of mine's dad works was an engineer for Amtrak, and they would always make him take a week off if something like that happened. That wasn't the case for your company?
Well, it was, but we didn't get them on the head end. So they were like, well, you didn't have to see it happen. So that was some kind of way around it or something. It was
that's
it's still
fucking bullshit though.
I probably was the last person to look that guy in the eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, it hit me up all night just thinking about it. In the hotel, I was like, this sucks.
Damn, dude.
So if you got somebody on the head end or something, you would get a few days off. The Amtrak gets a lot of people because they're faster. And they're also on a schedule, so anybody that's trying to do it, they don't have to. It's not a guessing game. They could just figure out when the next train's coming through town and handle it.
Oh, totally.
So Amtrak, they get a lot. It's actually, it's one of the reasons I guess I wouldn't necessarily want to be an Amtrak engineer. That would kind of be rough. Yeah.
Well, without us getting too derailed into morbid train death fatality topics, do you have any other stories that you usually tell people about when you're working as an engineer, maybe just stupid employees or stupid people, just what's a great? I
got one.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Did you have a question?
What is the stupidest interaction you had with a bull?
An interaction with the bull?
Yeah, the dumbest one you ever had to have.
I never really see the train crews, conductors and engineers and so on. We never really encountered the bulls. They were kind of a separate. They were at the same place, but they kind of kept in this little part of the office that we never had to really go into much. So we really didn't. I would never have known one of their names or dealt with them at all. I don't think that I ever.
When you started writing.
When I started writing, in Chicago, we had to run from one, and Had to run across the freeway like Frogger. That was wild. Clovis is supposed to have a really bad bull, and we got spotlighted there. They had like a mirror on a spotlight on a selfie stick or something with like a flashlight, and he was running the cars and looking in the wells, and just kept going past us. Like, didn't seem to actually shine it on us, but it was like enough that we didn't want to go to jail, you know. So we hopped off as soon as we could and got a hotel and then hitchhiked out the next day. So that bull scared us.
I'm kind of curious. Did you ever, train riders and stuff always like hear stories and anecdotes about maybe not the bull, but like other workers driving around in trucks that have like mirrors that look down into wells and things like that. You ever see things like that as an engineer?
No. Whenever I was working there, it didn't seem like anybody really gave a shit about riders. Didn't really seem like a factor at all. I'm sure the bulls did, but as far as any employees, like nobody really cared. When I was a fireman, stuff to engineering training. There was one time in Reno or Sparks where we walked through the locomotives. We were doing an inspection, and I was with an engineer. I'm a student engineer, and I walked into the second locomotive and I saw a rider sleeping in there, and I was like, "Oh shit! Hey, you might want to try to fucking duck out for a minute. Wait till we get this thing inspected, and then come back on."
That's
as we're having that discussion, the engineer's walking up behind me, and he kind of like, comes in. He could tell that I was talking to somebody, I think, and so he kind of like pushed his way into the door, kind of pushed me out of the way, and he's like real aggressive, and he says, "You need to get the fuck out of here," or whatever, and starts like chewing that guy out, which kind of sucked. I hope got back on, but I don't know. So that was the only time that I ever saw a train crew person not seem to be bothered by a rider. That was the only time. Going back to, just because I remembered a couple stories that you guys had asked if workers doing anything stupid. There was one time where we were coming out of I was in engineering training for this one too, and I can't say his whole name, but his first name's Chris. He was my engineer, and so I'm in the middle seat. He's in the engineer seat, and then the conductor over here. And we're coming through, coming out of Oakland, and we're following Amtrak, which is a nice place to be because they get all the green, and usually you're right behind them. And you just kind of eat those greens. As long as you stay 3 blocks behind them, you'll just keep getting greens with them. And so it's a really sweet spot. We're just following the Amtrak, but then we heard over the radio. The Amtrak engineer calls in to the dispatcher and says, "Hey, there's some kids out here at Gilman Street, which is one of the streets that crosses over, and he says there's kids out here and they're throwing rocks at the train. Just want to let you know," or whatever. And she says, "Okay, we'll get somebody out there to take care of it." And then she immediately tones us up on the radio because we're the next train to pass through. And she says, "Did you guys copy that?" And we said, "Yeah, we heard. We'll keep the windows closed," or whatever, this and that. She says, "Okay." And so I guess we're maybe about 7-8 minutes later or something like that. We're rolling through and we're looking for him, and the engineer's like, "I'm going to get these motherfuckers." So he gets down into the refrigerator and gets the bottles of water and puts them up on his little console or whatever, and opens his window, and he's basically going to just like huck these bottles at the kids. We're going like probably 60 miles an hour plus the velocity of it. Probably like about 75 mile an hour, water bottle coming at you. And he's just like all excited to get him, and we're getting up there, and he thinks he sees some like silhouettes or whatever off to the side, and then it turns out it's just some homeless people, and so we just go past them or whatever, and then up a little further ahead he sees some silhouettes by there's an overpass just after Gilman Street, and they're kind of tucked back under the overpass, and he's like, "That's them, I know that's them right there, that's where they'd hide," or whatever. And so as we're getting up there, right before the light managed to like illuminate like the whole, I don't know, it was something about the way that maybe there was a wall or something there, I don't know what it was, but they weren't illuminated at first. It was like silhouettes, and he lets the bottle go as fast as he can, and right whenever he lets it go, either they put their lights on or the headlight cleared the wall or whatever it was blocking the light. But right after the bottle lets go, they're eliminated, and it's like 6 or 7 cops just right there with their flag. I guess they had came out to like,
Holy shit!
yeah, he just let the bottle go right at the cops, and for the rest of the trip, we were just like, oh, we were so fired. We never got a call. So I don't know. I guess maybe they probably didn't see it happen, and it definitely didn't hit them, because if it did, we would have gotten a call. I think it was yeah, we were biting our knuckles on that one.
That's pretty funny.
God, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Even better.
Another time on the subject of throwing water bottles, where we went up to it was on New Year's Eve. It was a really fucked up night. The snow had closed the 80. I was an engineer at this point, and the 80 was closed because of the snow, so they couldn't get vans to get crews to the trains to relieve them. And so trains were like piling up back to back to back, or back to nose, and so on. And it was causing like a meltdown. And so their solution was to put us in the high railers, so they're like the trucks that have the actual wheels that keep the trucks guided onto the tracks,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it before. It's just a regular pickup truck on those train tracks. So those high railers, they put us in there with the driver. His name was Bird Eye, and the plan was to drive. I think there were 2 crews. Yeah, there were 2 crews with us. So we were like a loaded cab, and the plan was to drive up, and he would drop one of us off at one train, and then get back on the little mountain roads and get up to the next train tracks or whatever, and drop the other crew off. And anyway, we're driving on the tracks, coming up behind one of the trains. I think the train that we were getting on, and there was this guy that just came out of the mountains. Like, this is like deep back, like up on Donner Pass, like just way out in the cuts, and this guy just bails off the side of the mountain, like looking like Ted Kaczynski, and runs right to the side of the truck. And the driver, Bird Eye, he like rolls the window down. He's like, "Can I help you?" And that guy's like, "I need a ride." He's like, "I'm sorry, we can't give you a ride," or whatever. And he's like, "Fuck this!" And he like starts ripping the back door open of the truck on the driver's side. It's like a 4-door cab or whatever. And then my conductor's over there. My conductor's like punching at him like this, trying to keep him out of the cab, and finally gets the door shut again or whatever, and we take off. And which was wild, because we almost got carjacked in a high railer. Which is
where the fuck is he gonna go?
Like, exactly. What was like, if assuming he had made it into the cab with us, like, was that going to be like a comfortable ride? Like, fight his way in, and then we're just going to be like, "Oh, okay, it's cool now. Where are you going?" So they fought him off, and we drove past, got to our train, and then our train's turned towards us, so it's coming back the same way. And so my conductor and I get on, and then we're driving back. I'm not driving back, we're on the train, so I guess we're rolling back towards Colfax is where it was. It was probably just east of Colfax. And my conductor saw him, and he got his bottles up in the window and like hucked 2 at him as hard as he could. I don't know if he hit him. It's hard to tell. But right after that, it was like 2 miles after that, the dispatcher called, and she's like, "I need you guys to hold up at Colfax or whatever. We have this and that going on, and we got to have you guys wait for like this train to pass." And we had to sit there for like 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours. And I just, the whole time, I'm just thinking, oh my God, like that guy saw us throw the water bottles at him, and he's walking to the rear, he memorized what the rear car of our train is. And he's like walking up to it, and he sees the rear car, and he's like, "That's the train. I'm going to get these guys." He never showed up. But
it almost sounds like a weird horror movie or something.
Yeah. Right.
Like The Hitcher 3. Like, this time it's on the rails. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, throwing those bottles usually got people in trouble,
Random question, but like, how much does an engineer make working on the railroad?
It depends on how much you work. They will work you as much as you can stand. So, I mean, you could basically, so you have to be gone at least 8 hours. So you can tie up or clock out essentially, so that they can call you back in 6.5 hours. So like from the moment you leave the yard office, 6.5 hours later, they can call you and they could say, be at work in an hour and a half. So you can be back to work 8 hours after you left. And I mean, a 12-hour shift is kind of rare. A lot of times you're out there longer than that. It seems like more often than not, you're out there over 12. And sometimes, like, I mean, I've been on trains as long as 30 hours. That was like only once and really rare, but 16 hours is pretty common for.
Is it hourly?
It's not hourly. It's by the miles. So,
okay.
So it's miles ran, but then after a certain
mile.
Yeah, it's by the miles, but it's also hourly. So it's kind of weird. It's like you, if you don't make it. So like, let's say I'm taking a train from like Roseville to Dunsmuir. It's like a couple hundred miles or whatever. If we don't make it and we end up only to like Reading or something and it's 12 hours, we have to stop. We can't like turn a wheel. You can't turn a wheel after 12 hours. If it takes them 3 more hours to get a relief crew called and in a van and sent to you guys, and then another hour and a half to get back to the yard office in Roseville, or maybe they're going to take you the rest of the way to Dunsmuir, depending on where they need crews at. All that time after the 12 hours is going to be like, overtime pay or whatever. But also, so it's weird, like not every direction had the same overtime start. So some places like Fresno, if you would go down to Roseville to Fresno, overtime started in 10.5 hours. So, you're getting paid by the miles. It's like a base rate. Yeah, it's like a base rate by the miles. But if you go beyond the time, which is 10.5 hours Fresno, then you start getting paid overtime on top of your base rate miles. Dunsmuir, the overtime didn't start till like 12.5 hours or something because it's more miles that trip. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that answers that or not. But
no, yeah, I got a pretty good idea.
Yeah, so that's how it works. It's mileage and overtime, and you get like, it's hard to really say like hourly how it works out.
So wait a minute, I'm a little confused. Is the hourly overtime, or when you get paid overtime, obviously it's going off an hourly basis, but how does that like coincide with the mileage basis that you're getting? Is it hourly based on the amount of mileage that you're making, or your rate for that, or?
Well, like, so like the miles would pay like a base amount like per mile. I don't know what it was, it's probably like $2 or something per mile or whatever. And then so let's say you had a 200-mile trip that was going to be 400 miles or $400, and so you were guaranteed $400. That's your day's pay. But then if it took you, let's say overtime on that trip starts at 12.5 hours and it took you 14.5 hours, then you're getting your $400 plus 2 hours overtime, because the 12.5 to 14.5 hours, you know what I mean, that you were on overtime.
Yeah.
That's going to be another,
What would be the hourly rate for that overtime then?
I don't remember what it was, honestly, but it was somewhere in the ballpark of like 40. I want to say close to 45, but I think a little.
Well, that's 43.
Yeah, I think it was about 43, because I remember thinking that I remember trying to calculate and kind of determining that the hourly rate was right about 30-ish, So
yeah.
So I think a little less. I think it was like 29 and change. So yeah, probably 43 or something like that would have been, so you'd get another, it'd be almost like a $500 trip is what that would be, You get a lot of those. Engineers make great money. If I worked every time that they wanted me to go to work and I never called in sick, I could make over 100,000, like 110,000 or so.
Wow.
But a lot of times I'd get kind of burned out, and so I'd take some days off here and there, and so I ended up like pulling like 90 or so. Conductors could probably make about 90 if they worked all the time, and if you took a little bit of time off, you're probably in like the 70 to 90, maybe 60 to maybe 60 to 80 is probably a more realistic number. 60 to 80 for a conductor, depending on how often you work. 60 if you're really trying to milk your days off as much as possible, and then 80K if you really stayed up against it, and then engineers would be about 110 if you really worked your ass off. And it also depends on how there's a lot of like maneuvering, like there's a lot of different boards that you can work. So you're not always like working the same job. You do a lot of like seniority moves and like bid onto other people's jobs when they're on vacation, and kind of work yourself into jobs that pay a lot. It's kind of hard to explain. It's a really in-depth process, but basically anytime that someone's on vacation that has a really high-paying job, people are trying to hunt for that position and trying to put a bid in on it real quick to work his job instead, and you'll get paid his wages while he's on vacation. So there's a lot of maneuvering that you could do to kind of break up the monotony where you're not working the same job every day, and then also getting paid more, depending on what you're grabbing.
That's another question I had too. Was you said you worked out of like Fresno, Roseville, and how far would you go, like outside of that area, or you just go on the same route back and forth all the time?
Same route, yeah, same route back and forth. So like, if I were to take like it could be any train. I could be taking some autos down from Roseville to Fresno or something, and those might go further south somewhere to LA. I don't know. Whatever the train was, they would send me to Fresno. That would be my final destination. So then I would lay over in a hotel here, or actually my house because I lived here. And then the next day I would get a call back, and it would be a totally unrelated train, So I might catch a grain train back or a Z train back or whatever.
But it's not like they would send you to the East Coast or anything like that.
No. The only trains that do that, they used to, whenever they're back in the days of cabooses, I think railroads worked a little more like that. The caboose was like the crew's apartment. It wasn't. They didn't swap out those cabooses. They were like, you had your own shit in there. That was your little apartment on wheels that you towed around behind you. So after you got done with a trip, they would pull you into the rip track or whatever, and you would camp out at night in your caboose, and then the next day you would get on another train going further, and you could go pretty far in those days doing that. But
have you ever stayed in a caboose?
No. I mean, other than just checking them out. Like, I have a friend up in Black Butte that has some really nice restored cabooses, and some of them are like restored to where that he can live in them and stuff.
I've seen one modern caboose that was obviously still in use. It looked no more than a decade or so old. But that was one time, and that's like the one and only time I've seen one that wasn't an antique.
Was it in Bakersfield by chance?
It was actually in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's a couple here and there that still run. And it's because the way that the local industries that they service, it's basically run a caboose or have a conductor ride the shove for like 9 miles or something, and no conductor is going to want to hang on to a ladder for 9 fucking miles all the way out to 10 miles an hour. They won't let you ride the porch on a grainer, so you can't even do like the more comfortable positions. You would have to hold on to the ladder, so no one's going to do that. So in a situation like that, they'll have a caboose for that specific industry or whatever. That's the only occasions that I've seen cabooses still active, is because they don't want a conductor having to ride the shove really far.
Yeah. Someone in the chat had a question about slang. Like, wondering if there's like any slang terms that the railroad workers use, or if there's a comparable version that train riders use, or if they're the same or different.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ones. Like an obvious one is grainers and hoppers. Like I call them grainers now because I've been around you guys so much, but the railroaders call them hoppers. So that's what they're defined as, hoppers. But the riders,
Yeah.
grainers. I can't think of a whole lot of other ones, actually. You guys are pretty dialed in. That was one of the things that I was really kind of surprised by meeting riders whenever I was first meeting them, was like, wow, like, how do you guys know what a fret is? How do you guys, like you were overly informed.
Andy, you said you don't know, or you do know?
No, I don't know.
Oh,
Absolutely
okay.
not.
Do you want to explain that, Jason?
Sure. So it's basically a caboose. It's what replaced the caboose. So the caboose used to be like, you would have a crew back there, and you would have like some air valves and stuff, and the crews would communicate with the head end by lantern signal, or even radios whenever they got them, and basically let the engineer know what the air pressure was on the rear, and just a couple other things. Basically, they weren't just there for the air pressure. It made things convenient whenever they were doing work, to have people on the rear of the train sometimes. But the railroad's always been trying to reduce the amount of crews. And so when technology advanced to the point where they were able to use satellite, they developed a system where they have a head-end device that's like an electronic, it's like a signal sending like unit that beams up to a satellite and then beams down to the rear end of the train, where there's you've probably seen a red flashing light at the end of a train. That's actually, that is the Fred. That's the Fred, and it's just it's basically just an air. It's like a air measurement valve. You know what I mean? That sends a signal up the satellite and down to the head end and tells it what the air pressure is on the rear, because you can only have like a variance of 5 pounds of pressure between the two. If you have more than that, then you have to like stop and figure shit out, replace air hoses. You have a leak somewhere, so it's just a way to know how much air pressure is on the rear, because you have to have like air brake continuity throughout the whole train without losing too much.
That's funny, because like that's a lot more detailed than I even knew, actually, just because as a train rider, it's always just, that's the blinking red thing at the end, so you know which is the ass end and which isn't.
Right. Yeah, that's also what it is. It's a marker for safety, I think, too. When you're following a train on the rails, you can see that there's one ahead of you. You see the marker there, so it's definitely a safety thing too. But I think the primary reason is to know how much air you got back there, and also just to get rid of the extra crew. That's what the railroad came up with it for.
What were you gonna say, Andy?
Oh no, I was just agreeing. Like, got it. Totally. Learn something. Awesome.
Cool.
Always trying to do that.
Jules asked about double back. Specifically, do rail workers use that term, double back? I've heard that used before, but I don't know if it's used in the same way. Like, I would say that I've heard that more in the yards, like switchmen. Like, if you're switching multiple rails, you're basically like going into a rail, like reaching into a rail, grabbing a few cars, and then pulling those out, and then shoving down into another rail and hooking onto more cars, and then you might, after you grab those cars, you might double back to the rail that you were just in and put them, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's like a game of Tetris kind of, you're just kind of stacking cars on top of each other in a certain order, so that whenever the locals go out, they'll have their cars in the right order to put to the industries. And so I've heard switchmen definitely use the word double back, just doubling back to the rail that you were just in. I don't know if I don't imagine that's how you as a rider would use that term though. What does double back mean to a rider?
You're familiar with hump yards?
With hump yards, yeah.
Yeah, engineers call them hump yards.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if there's any difference there. It's like everyone's just like, you don't want to get humped in the hump yard. Right.
That sounds awesome, but still a question remains. What is it?
I don't know if we ever called them hump yards. I think we would say the hump track is what they called it in Roseville. It was
Still awesome. What is that?
So for Andy and anyone else not familiar, I mean the hump yard, at least to the train rider, is always just like the spot where they kind of like toss cars down the track to like disconnect cars and then toss them down the track to connect with other cars. I mean that's a very layman's version of it, but I'm sure Jason, you probably have a better explanation.
That's basically it. The reason for the hump is it's just gravity. So like you have let's say you have a really long train and the rear of it, you're shoving it up towards this hump, and so as it's coming towards the hump, you have a switchman there at the very peak of the hump, and he has a list and he knows which tracks he needs his cars to go into. He's building basically a bunch of smaller trains with this big train, or even a bunch of bigger trains with this big train. You know what I mean? Multiple big trains will come in and all be humped into other trains. It's just a way of like distributing like the commodities of all these trains into the right locations. And so whenever it reaches the top of the hump, he'll pull the cutting lever on it, which will release the knuckles from the rest of the train, so that car will then become free, and then they'll hit the brakes on the locomotive, and then the car that got cut free will roll down the hill. So it's just and then the line switches automatically to whatever rails they want that free rolling car to go into, and then it'll slam into the rest of the train in that track. So if you live next to
slam! That's where the hump comes from. Okay, got it.
Yeah, if you've ever lived near a hump track or a hump yard or anything, you don't sleep very well at night, probably because they're slamming all the time. But also, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a hump track there. It could also just mean that they're kicking cars there. So the process that I described earlier with the remote control locomotive, and you're running alongside the car, and you pull the lever, and then you hit the brakes, and then the rest of the, that's the same thing as humping. It's just that you don't have to run alongside and pull the lever whenever you're humping. You just stand at the hill and let gravity do all the work. Whenever you don't have a hump in a yard, then you have to kick cars, and so you got to run alongside and get the speed up so that the car will roll into the rails, because there's no hills. So that's you'll still hear slamming in a yard that doesn't have a hump. It's just they're kicking cars the old way there.
Yeah, it's definitely, and for the riders too, it's like it's something you really don't want to be in, because when you do coast and finally hit that string of cars or whatever, you go flying across the across the car.
Yeah.
It's not very much fun, really. It kind of sucks.
Yeah, but I have seen, just to answer Jules, I have seen the do not hump stickers. Yeah, quite a bit.
I think Brian Conaway in the chat there had another question for you, Jason, about whether it's dangerous for the knocker to be disconnecting those cars before they go over the hump.
It's dangerous for the knocker to be disconnecting those cars before they go over the hump. The knocker, so you're talking about the carmen, right? They call the carmen car knockers, I think.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with that term.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. If that's the case, the carmen should absolutely not be disconnecting any cars. The carmen they don't touch cutting levers at all. It's like they would get fired if they did that. Their job is to release the air valves on the equalizing reservoirs, so a lot of times they'll have those little buggies, and they'll have a little rod with a hook, and they'll pull. You'll see them reach out with the rod, and they'll pull the little thing, and it like releases the air. They're just bleeding off the air in the car. So that's what the carmen do basically, and they check the train whenever it comes in and goes. They do the inspections on the cars and stuff, make sure that they're good to travel further and things like that. But they don't ever pull the cutting levers or break cars apart. It would definitely be dangerous if they did that, because the other crews would have no way of knowing that cars were pulled apart.
I wanted to touch on one more thing real quick just before we move on to train riding or train hopping. But I remember back when we first met, like you were telling me some stories about the remote control units.
Yeah.
The chest device that you had to wear and like constantly push a button. Can you tell people a little more about that? Like what it was for? It's for automated locomotives, but
Yeah.
maybe just explain how automated trains work.
It's basically like a remote control car, and it's a little more complicated. You know, the whatever it is that whatever system they have inside the locomotive, it controls all the throttles and air brakes and all of those things. All of those are controlled from this little belt pack that you have. I can't remember the name of the damn things, but they're made in Canada, and yeah, it's just like, it kind of looks just like a fanny pack, but it's like steel, and it has some levers on it and stuff, you know, and a little button for the horn, and two knobs on both sides that have like thumb like thing, like where your thumbs push in, they throttle up and down and stuff like that. But you basically just you run the locomotive that way. They don't typically use them for, like, you wouldn't like be sitting on a locomotive using them. They're designed more for when you're on the ground, and so the locomotive actually doesn't have a person on. The locomotive's like running free, and that's why you'll see a lot of times they'll have like neon signs that'll say like a remote control locomotive, you know, warning or whatever. They're letting you know like there's trains in this yard that don't even have people on them. You know, they're just fucking like free rolling trains. So be really careful. You know, you can't just walk in front of an RCO and expect somebody to see you, because they might be 80 cars into a rail, like, you know, and they would never have any kind of way of seeing you at all.
That sounds mildly terrifying.
It's super dangerous. Riding trains, definitely, you know, nobody should do it without some kind of knowledge about it. You know what I mean? Find somebody that knows, because there's a lot of dangerous shit. Yeah. So those, so normally you would need somebody on the head end, right? You would need somebody to be watching the direction that this train is traveling in. But in an RCO yard, they have these pucks set up at the very end of the yard. And they're distanced out, you know, like the first puck might be at 1,000 feet, and then the next puck might be at like 500 feet, and then the next one at 250 feet. And then at the zero line, it would be a derail. And that's right before the main line. So, you know, you'll see that in a lot of yards whenever you follow the tracks and you look at like how the yard works. It's going to be, there's always going to be a derail switch, a manual derail that's right before the main line lets out, you know what I mean? Or the yard lets out to the main line. And that's set up. That derail is always on, designed to derail a train, and you'll have the remote control locomotives. When they pass those pucks, it will start to apply brakes, and if you get to the last two or whatever, it's going to put more and more braking power on it, so that by the time that you get to the last puck, it won't even allow you to go. It's like trying to take those shopping carts out of the parking lot, and then the wheels lock up at some point. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like that.
Fucking
Yeah, it's fucking annoying. So the locomotives basically have that in the yard. They have these little pucks that will stop the locomotives from going out onto the main line, and they would rather derail it, but they won't derail because the pucks stop it. So unless that system is broken, and I derailed one time because the system was broken. That was a mess. But yeah, it's pretty neat. You know, it kind of sucks because it's one of those things that kind of eliminated crews, and you know, that's kind of it's a shitty thing. Or it's always trying to do that. They're trying to like make it to where there's only one person running the train, you know, and it used to be like 7. So it's how bad it's gotten.
Well, you know, that's a good. That reminds me of something I wanted to ask you too. Actually, is you said you derailed a train at some point, or have you witnessed other trains derail as well? How serious was it? Anything super crazy?
Never anything super crazy. As far as what I've seen, it's always been most of the derailments are really low speed. Like they're usually in the yard, so 10 miles an hour or less. The main line's usually really well maintained, so you don't see a whole lot of main line derailments. It's the yards that are real like decrepit, and they don't take very, very good care of them. So the yards will generally have more derailments, and that's where all mine have happened. I think I've derailed 3 times, and they've all been 10 miles an hour or less. And it's it still causes a lot of damage. Those wheels will cut the ties. They'll drop down between the 2 rails, and they'll cut the ties like a pizza cutter. Just slice right through them, and all those ties will just be busted up, and steel gets bent, and shit gets fucked up. But I imagine.
And you slice through it like a pizza cutter?
The what?
And I said you slice through them like a pizza cutter? That sounds fucking heavy duty.
Yeah, the wheels. I mean, if you think about the wheels on a rail car and the weight on top of them, on those wooden ties, and the wooden ties in a rail yard are old and fucking shitty. So yeah, those wheels will just cut right through those fucking things.
Jesus.
Yeah, but it's never too crazy. I mean, I don't know. There was one time where I almost fucked myself up. I probably died. I was standing right at a switch, and or not far from it anyway, and then I was standing with my remote control and running the rear car into the track of the switch that I lined, and the wheel had picked the switch. If there's like kind of shitty switch points, sometimes the wheel will pick the switch and jump off the wrong way, and that's what it did. It picked the shitty switch and it jumped off the wrong way and immediately derailed and started tearing up the ground. The train's off the rails at this point. It's kind of coming like right at me, and it was a tank car. It was like a hazardous thing, and I'm just like, fuck.
I picture this movie like where like the train's like grinding into the gravel and spraying gravel everywhere right towards you, and you're just running like
There was a lot of shit getting busted up. It was those things are really heavy. You know what I mean? It's not anything lightweight.
Yeah.
They're off the rails. There's a lot of gravel and dirt flying around, and I just ran, and I never stood in that position again. I learned at that point like to always factor in that this could pick the switch, and so I would always stand off a ways from then on. The senior management of what's it called? Manager of operations, MOP. Anyway, the manager there tried to put that on me. Bill Bidwell, he's a fucking dick.
That bitch.
Yeah.
I'm just like trying to picture myself in that situation, and if you ever seen like Austin Powers, the scene with the fucking steamroller when it's coming at him, like, no! Yeah, I would not have moved. I would just freaked.
Trying to go over the questions here. Yeah. Hook to ground air. What does it mean? See strength. Yeah, if there's something that's hooked to the ground air, I would assume that's definitely going to leave soon. They're trying to get that. They're trying to get that aired up, so that they could do air testing. They would have no reason to put air to it if it was going to be, if you could picture a train being like set out in the yard and then being broken up. The first thing that happens is a carman will come along with that hook, and he'll release the valves on all the cars and drain all the air out, because those cars will free roll, and you could kick them with no air, and so that's how they want them, so that they could bust them up and stuff. So yeah, if a train's not going to go anywhere, they don't want any air in it. So there's a difference. Okay, if a train's just going to sit, but it's not going to be broken up, it's just going to sit. Like, let's say a train has to be left at a siding for a couple days. They'll put a big set of air in it, and they'll tie down the handbrakes and they'll leave it. So you want air in it in that situation. But in a yard, typically a train isn't going to sit for long. It's either going to be broken up or it's going to be sent out one way or another, you know what I mean? Or something. And so if they got air running to it from the ground, they're trying to air it up to test it and get it. I would say it's ground air. They're going to send it out.
Okay, cool. I kind of want to, I want to move on just a little bit to how. Let's just start with, when was the first time you saw like train riders working as an engineer or any other position on the railroad?
The very first would have been when I was still a conductor in. I was a conductor in Bakersfield, and it was actually the very last day, my very last assignment as a conductor there, and they picked up my bid in Roseville to be a conductor there. So I was going to drive from Bakersfield after I got off work all the way up to Roseville to, and then I was just going to go to bed and be ready to go to work there the next day. That's where my new assignment was. And as I was leaving Bakersfield, I saw a hitchhiker. He was he was maybe after Oildale, I don't remember, but I passed him up because I'd never picked up a hitchhiker at that point in my life. I passed him up by a couple miles, and then something just like got into my head, and I don't know what it was, but I just decided to turn around and drove all the way back to an exit beyond where he was, so that I can get back on and make sure that I passed him again in the same manner. And so it took quite a ways to get back around to him again, but when I did, I was happy to see that he was still there, and so I offered him a ride or whatever, and he said that he was going to Roseville, which was really cool because that's where I was going. So I was like, whoa, yeah, I'm actually going all the way, and he was super stoked.
Hell yeah.
His name was Grayson, and he had half of his mustache was gray. It was like a birthmark or something. And I've never seen that kid since then, but I've told a few people that story, hoping that somebody knows Grayson. I'd love to catch up with that dude. So yeah, we rode all the way to Roseville and just talked a lot, told stories and whatnot. And he told me about just a lot of different shit. He was doing a lot of like rigging for old growth forests, and loggers and stuff. They were doing a lot of like protesting, and so he would like rig himself up into shit, and he was real into that. And he was like riding trains, and he wanted me to drop him off basically where he can catch a northbound from Roseville. So he had me take him to like near Amtrak. I think that's when people were still catching it, like Rainbow Bridge or something like that, around the Y. I think that's why he had me drop him off there. That was the first person that, I had a friend that I grew up with, my friend Matt Riley, that he started riding trains when, before I even started working for the railroad. So I kind of hear his stories a little bit. He moved out to Arkansas, and then he did like that punks sail down the Mississippi River, that whole thing. Like he did that many years ago too, and so he had a lot of stories, and so I learned a little bit from him, and then meeting Grace, and that kind of made me aware of it. And then I started working in Roseville, but I hadn't really seen active people like riding until the Dead Man Street Orchestra. Those 6 individuals that I saw the tree.
Can you tell us about that story, like how you met your first group of people like actually riding on a train?
Sure. So brace yourself. This is a big one.
I love this story.
Yeah, I haven't told it like verbally. Go ahead. Did you have something to say, Andy?
No, I was saying good luck. I was saying this story's gonna rock, and you should keep talking. Go for it. We had just brought a train out of Oakland into Roseville and pulled up on whatever it was, a number 2 track, I think, and just waiting on the van to come pick us up, to take us into the yard office. It's gonna be, my day is done basically, and happened to kind of just look over to the left, and there's like that old oak tree, and I saw like a bunch of people over there playing instruments, and I wasn't really sure. I'd never seen anyone over there before, so
I went and clocked out. I was really interested in it, but I couldn't hear the music. You know what I mean? The locomotives were really loud. So we went and clocked out, and then I got in my car and I drove back over there and walked through the field and introduced myself to these people. And they were all pretty welcoming. There were 6 of them, 4 male, 2 female. They went by the name the Dead Man Street Orchestra, which you can't really find much of their music online, which is really unfortunate. They do have a CD called Where's Corey, but it's really hard to find. I have a copy of it. And then there's only one song on YouTube, and it's not their best stuff. But at any rate, so I met them, and they were just really cool people. They knew a lot about trains, and it just they kind of felt like friends right away or something. And because I had listened to like punk music and grew up in squats and stuff at a young age too. Like I'd stayed in squats and whatnot, and kind of been homeless. So it was like a familiar kind of vibe anyway, like meeting people that are traveling like this, you know what I mean? And then my friend Matt Riley was, a train rider and so on. So it just, they kind of already felt like familiar to me in a way. And we just got along really well. And so I loaded a couple of them up, and we went to the liquor store and bought them like a bunch of tobacco and a lot of fancy beer. They called it fancy beer. I thought that was funny. We
fancy beers. Like,
hit the grocery store and bought so much food and had this amazing feast down there and drank. I made like a ice chest out of a cardboard box, like got a couple of the bags from the rail yard and a big bag of ice, and kind of like fashioned it into an ice box and just loaded it up with all of our food and beer, and we just kind of like raged down there like all night, and I passed out down there in the field, and just woke up the next day and went to the yard office and got a printout of the yard, like the inbound and outbound, and where all the trains were going and whatnot. They were trying to go to Portland for Mutant Fest 2005, I think it was. So I went and got the list and got some more supplies and stuff for them and brought it back, and I was just kind of like real excited about helping them get out of the yard and stuff. And then at some point I was just like, man, like maybe I could do this. And they were like, you should come with us. And I agreed, and I did. I didn't have a sleeping bag, so I had to run to. I'm sorry, backing up. I printed out a list of like I think it was track 7 had a train that was going to Dunsmuir to lay over for a night, and then it was going the rest of the way to Portland. So so I had the details on the train they were going to ride already, and it was on duty in an hour and a half. So I rushed to the sporting goods place and bought a sleeping bag, came back, and they were kind of all gearing up to go, and we ran across the stream of cars. It was so weird because like this is my workplace. Like I'm we here, and I'm like sneaking with like these 6 other people like through these like cuts of cars. I could totally get fired. But it was like, I don't know. It was something different, taking risks. And we got to the 7 track, and then I looked at my list, and I'm like, okay, we got to go this way. It's going to be right around this bend. There's going to be some box cars or whatever, and they're empty, so hopefully they're open. And we got to that car, and sure enough, it was open. So we hopped in, and 7 of us in the end of a box car, and just kind of waiting around. And then you could hear the carmen kind of doing their tests and stuff. They're double teaming our train with the buggies, so they're kind of passing back and forth. And at some point, they stopped right at the rear knuckle of the car that we're in. They saw on both sides, like one's going north, one's going south, and they come to meet right at the rear knuckle. And they happen to just sit there and they're talking. And so like if I just kind of lean a little bit, I can see like one of them. They're like, it's just horrible positioning. Like, we're gonna get caught. This sucks, I'm gonna get fired. Got real nervous, but we're just staying as still as we can. But at some point, like one of them kind of pops his head out and looks, and he comes up to the side of the boxcar, and he's like, "How many of you are there?" And we just laughed or whatever and said 7. I can't remember what was said, but we just had some laughs or whatever because I guess it was comical to him, that there were so many people in the boxcar, and then he said, "All right, well, I didn't see nothing," and he just like goes back to talking with the other carmen.
Did you say anything about working for the railroad?
Yeah, because I was too nervous. I was like, "There's no way that he's going to let this slide. Like, he's just acting cool right now because there's 7 of us. But the moment that he gets away from us, he's going to turn us in." So I hopped down there and I was like, "Listen, man, you probably don't see this all that often." He's like, "I see this all the time. You're all good. Get back up in there." And I said, "Well, I'm a railroad employee here. Actually, I'm an engineer." And he's just like, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" I was like, "No. I met these kids and they seem really cool. I like their music." And so he was kind of like blown away by that. And I said, "I'm just trying to like enjoy a little freedom. They work us a lot, and this seemed interesting." And he goes, "Listen, man, I'm not going to say anything. Just hop back up in there quick." And so I did, and I kind of trusted him on that. I felt like I had his word. And
that's cool.
So we got back up in there. And, I did. But I was, it really did feel like he might have said something, and maybe he wouldn't have. So I don't know if I did us any favors or not, but we got out of the yard. We didn't get in trouble, so whatever happened, I think it was the right decision. So yeah, just rolling out of that yard was really weird because we rolled right by the yard office, and I'm just picturing it was the exact same yard office I took you to, Matt. So if you could picture that room that we were in.
Oh yeah.
With all the monitors and everything, and all the bigwig managers, that same room is the same room I was picturing, like when we were rolling by it, and I'm just envisioning all those managers just discussing, how they're gonna like pull this train to a stop and get this fucking engineer and make an example out of him. You know what I mean? On this train or whatever. I could just see it all unfolding, and but once we got to like. We went around under Rainbow Bridge there, and then once the rear end was clear of the yard and it started picking up speed, and started getting up to 20 and 30 miles an hour, I was like, they wouldn't take me this far from the yard. Like if they were going to do something, they would have stopped once they were clear of the yard. They would have got the rear end out of the yard so that it wasn't blocking up anything else, and then they would have came for me. But we're rolling, man, and it was really neat.
It's probably pretty fucking exhilarating, man.
That's whenever it set in, it was like we're really doing this, and then all of guys, guys and girls, they got their instruments out and started playing, and it was magical. It was really fucking neat. They played like a kind of klezmer at that time, it was kind of their style, and old timey. And so we just rolled up into like Mount Shasta, and the sun was going down, and it was a beautiful trip. Just having cold beers and live music in a boxcar. It was one that I can't really replicate as much as I'd like to. And then we got up to Dunsmuir, and the train did just like it said. It yarded for the night, and so we slept in the actual boxcar. We didn't even get out of the boxcar; we just slept in it. And the next morning, we woke up and got out and went and got some coffee and whatnot. And at some point, whenever I was jumping out of that damn boxcar, I didn't know what I was doing. This is the first time that I tried it, so I had my overalls on. I was sitting at the very edge of the boxcar, and I just kind of like scooted forward, like shot myself out forward, and I thought that would work, and the rear end of my overalls caught the little track that the boxcar slides in.
Oh yeah.
Like 2 foot gap out of my overalls, like my whole ass was just exposed. I didn't pack any more clothes than that. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, don't feel too bad, because I remember the first time I hopped off a train, I caught my frame pack on that same rail that you're talking about on the boxcar, and I ended up doing like 3 barrel rolls, like literally ass overhead, like next to the tracks, and I got up, and my knees were all bloody, and my jeans were all tore up. and it was pretty fucked up, and I was just like, ow.
That's terrifying, dude. Shit.
Well, I didn't know what I was doing, you know, and there was
That's even worse.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah, this is this is before I knew anything about train hopping. This is like 1998 or 1999 or something like that. But
this is also why there's a website where people can learn how to not fall ass over head while trying to get off the fucking train.
squattheplanet.com, where you won't fly ass overhead.
Jesus Christ.
I actually read that story in your book, Matt. Another plug. Yeah, it was pretty entertaining that we both got fucked up by that same rail.
Yeah.
So next day, I kind of did the same thing, but in Dunsmuir it's a lot different. In Roseville, it's a huge yard office, and nobody really knows who's who. I mean, I was able to sneak Matt in there, and nobody knew shit. And so, but in Dunsmuir, it's a very small yard office, and it's very different. And whenever I walked in there, it was like they could just smell like something was up. Like, well, one guy actually was like a
dirty kid.
Yeah, one guy actually hired on with his son. So the guy that I mentioned earlier. There was the chef at the casino or whatever. His dad was a conductor, and his dad happened to be up here at this place, and he always knew like everybody's business, but not in a bad way. Like he was real into trains. He was real into his job. He loved being a conductor, and just he was always on top of like who was working what trains and where they were. You know, so when you would work with him, like when you would pass a train. Or if a train would pass you, like I would never know who the fuck was on that train, but he would know. Like he would know both the conductor and engineer and all the shit, you know what I mean, where that train was going, whatever. He was like really nerded out on it. And so when he saw me, he was like, "You're called in sick in Roseville. What in the fuck are you doing in Dunsmuir?" Like, oh shit. And I was like, no, I can't. Yeah. So I said I came in last night with Lynn Gale or whatever. He's like, "What?" And I was in a crew room of people that I didn't know, and it turned out that the guy that I said that I came in with, because I chose his name because the paperwork that I had on the train that we rode in, he was the engineer on the train. This guy Lynn Gale was, and so I said, and what's odd, super odd, is that the guy that I was talking to, the conductor, his name is Lynn Thomas. So two males named Lynn. Really weird. At any rate, so I said, "Yeah, I came in with Lynn Gale or whatever," and Lynn Thomas looks at me and he's like, "What?" And he turns around and he goes, "Hey, Lynn, did he come in with you?" And I'm like, "Oh shit!" And
busted.
And this old man who I'd never seen before looks over at me and he goes, "Nah, he didn't come in with me." And then I just had to level with them. I go, "Look, guys, I did come in with you last night, and I came in with you. I was, maybe 20, 30 fucking boxcars back or whatever. I came in with like a whole band of gypsies. We rode in playing songs and whatnot. And I know that's not exactly like cool or whatever, but that's what happened. And they all really liked the adventure of the story. You know what I mean? Lynn Thomas, especially.
Jesus Christ, if you ever roll a fucking D20 on a 20, Jesus.
You did luck out pretty hard, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So they got a kick out of it, and then Lynn Thomas said, he said, "Well, you could just hop in the second locomotive of our train on the way back, because I had to go back to Roseville." And then my friends, they were going to go further up north to Mutant Fest or whatever. So he said, "Just ride back with us or whatever." And talk about actually rolling 20 for 20. So when I'm coming back, I'm like getting to the point where like I'm no longer called in sick, and they're going to put me back on the active board, and they do. And I'm on this train going back. I'm not getting paid or nothing. I'm just my name is available to be called on this board of people, but I'm like 20th out or something, and as the hours go by, now I'm 16th out and 14th out and so on, and I'm trying to get, we're getting closer to the yard, and then this fucking bridge fire happens ahead of us and like shuts down the whole fucking railroad. It was at Berg Siding, and shuts down we just couldn't go any further because the fucking bridge was on fire. So they stop us, and we sat there for hours and hours. And I'm calling in and listening to how far out I am on the board, and I'm like, third out, second out, first out. Fuck, I'm just freaking out. Oh
shit, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to make it to work, and I didn't want to miss another day because how it worked is if you missed 3 days, you can miss 3 days every 2 weeks, and you wouldn't lose your assign, or you would. No, I think it was the third day. Yeah, that's what it was. I think you can miss 2 days. If you miss 3, no, you can miss 3. That's what it was. Yeah, you can miss 3 and you wouldn't lose your guarantee. But if you missed more than 3, you would lose your guarantee. And the guarantee was like the board that I was working like guaranteed like 4,800 every 2 weeks or whatever, if you worked all but 3 days basically, and so. I didn't want to lose my guarantee, and so having to call in sick would have fucked me over really bad. I would have only earned whatever days I worked, and so it would have been the difference of probably like maybe 1,000 or more, and so I was kind of sweating that, didn't want to do it, and so I just decided to kind of roll the dice on it, and whenever they called me, I was just going to take my call and just fucking hope some kind of miracle happened, and that the van that was supposed to pick up my crew, that they would have somehow got there by then or something, or that I would just show up a little bit late at least and it would work out. Uh-huh. Anyway, the crew caller calls me, Jean, this really gruff old lady, and she calls me on duty, and I said, okay, I'll be there or whatever. And then she says, you're on duty with Jared Farmer. You're going to go out to Sassoon and patch, you're going to dog catch a train and bring it back to Roseville. So I'm like, okay, that sounds great. It's actually a really nice call for not much sleep and stuff, so just calling for that, and I'm just sitting there, and then I remembered like, oh fuck, Jared Farmer lives in Marysville. So I called up Jared Farmer, my conductor, and I said, have you left for work yet? And he goes, no. And I go, how far are you from Berg Siding? And he goes, it's about 5 minutes away or whatever. And I said, is that at all possibly on your way? And he goes, I go right by that siding on my way to work. And so I said, can you stop at Berg Siding and pick me up? I'm on this train. And he's like, what are you doing on a train? That's a long story. I'll tell you whenever you pick me up, So it worked out so beautifully that I caught that conductor, and he happened to live 5 minutes away from where I was sitting. I'm on his way to work, so he picks me up, takes me into work. We go out and patch that Sassoon train or whatever, bring it back in. It was a really short day, like 4 hours. Got paid, $400 for 4 hours or something. It was a really nice ending to that trip or whatever, and then
I feel like it was a very, very stressful process to get to that ending, because
yeah it was
during that time I'd be shitting bricks the entire time and freaking out.
Yeah, the worst that would have happened is I would have had to call back in and say, hey, listen, I fucked up, make up a lie, my car broke down or whatever, I'm not going to be able to make it into work, and then I would have lost my guarantee. It's the worst that would have happened, but I just didn't want to do it, so I was really fortunate that things worked out in my favor. And then I was kept up with those friends throughout the years, and they're making music still these days, some of them are really successful. That's pretty much all they do is just make music and float around on sailboats and shit, friends, yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that's something I haven't like the sailboat.
What's that, Andy?
Oh no, saying that sounds like the dream. Except I get motion sickness, they'll replace sailboat with something land based. On a train because
Well, hey Jason, I want to fit in the story before we hit the 2 hour mark here. I want people to hear your story about breaking your leg.
Okay.
Because that fascinates the living fuck out of me. Just the way that panned out and how lucky you got again. It's just damn.
I seem to always land on my feet.
Yeah.
I think my brother said that about something, just that no matter how like fucked up of a scenario that I find myself in, I always seem to land on my feet. Almost, I mean, that was one of them where I kind of didn't, but I did. I was really fortunate in the help that I found. Yeah, so relates to the same original six travelers that I met. The Dead Man Street Orchestra. They went on and made new bands, and one of them is Tuba Skinny. And Tuba Skinny was playing at a friend's little kind of like private festival that he was throwing in kind of near Weed, California. And so he's having a little thing, and it's like a 3-day event or whatever. And so I went up there to that and got to hang out with my friends that I had met, in Roseville, so many years ago, and listen to their new music and stuff, and that was really cool. And then let's see, I'll tell the long version. It's not much longer, but
no, go for it. I prefer the long version.
Yeah, there were 2 Frenchmen there they wanted to make a documentary. They were making a documentary about female train riders, specifically, which was a little unusual. But and they had an Asian female train rider with them who was really quiet, and then it was just them two, and they mostly spoke French. And they, I don't know, they just kind of stayed by themselves. The guy that was running the event told him that he didn't want any camera footage going on, so they didn't really make a documentary there or whatever. But they come into the story later. So, like, I guess 2 days later or whatever, 3 days later, I hitchhike back to Mount Shasta, no, to Dunsmuir from Weed. I hitchhiked back there, and when I got there,
not to interrupt. But just real quick, just to give some context, I forgot to ask you, is this after, had you stopped working for the railroad at this point?
Yeah.
And
yeah, this was 3 years ago.
Oh yeah.
In July.
And so you were riding the rails as a train hopper now.
Yeah.
Pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a whole lot, but I mean, whenever I can sneak it in, I like to. And so I got dropped off in Dunsmuir, and I'm walking to that little market or whatever, and I happened to see the 2 Frenchmen and the Asian girl, and I'm like, oh, crazy, they're from that festival, and one of the guys comes up to me and he asked me if I know where the catch out is to go south, and I'm like, yes, I do. That's actually where I'm going to go too. So if you guys want to hang tight, I'm going to go to the store or whatever. And so I just grabbed my things from the store and then we walked down to the catch out together. And then they taught us how to play Yams, which is a really cool game. I want to relearn that actually. And so we were just sitting there playing like dice games and stuff. And then a train comes. And so the girl, I guess she was kind of like, she was hired or maybe, I don't know how it worked out. They arranged something with her to where that she was like a train rider, and she was like kind of like enlisted to show them how to get around the country. And while they also did a documentary of her and other female train riders that they could find on the way. And so she, and I think actually she knew where the catch out was, and they were clashing. So there was like some kind of attitude going on between them at the time.
Yeah.
It was kind of a moment that I caught up with them. It was a weird time. But at any rate, the train finally comes, and she's like, you two get on the rear or whatever. And so she like puts them on the rear of this like rideable car, and it's one of these tight, I don't know what the hell they're called, but it's kind of where you have to hide under that grate at the end of a well, and there's like, you're not really like too far down, and you're kind of like visible from like, I don't know what the fuck that type of rail car is, but it's not a 48. It's like I don't know what it is. There's very little room, and you're under a fucking grate and very visible.
It was on a hot shot high priority train?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so she puts them both, crams them under one grate, and then she runs it to the front. And there's no other rideable cars. The rest of them have no kind of room at all. And I'm like, fuck, man, I want to get out of this town. And I'm just like looking down the rail, like trying to see if I could spot any other ones that are rideable, and there's nothing. They're all like consistently the same spine cars. And so I ran up to the front end of that car, and I was like, look, can I just like ride with you until we get to like a sighting, and then I'll have more time, because we know this train's gonna fucking take off right now. They're just doing a quick crew change. And just hop up here, we'll get to the next sighting or whatever, and I'll go find another car so you have more room or whatever. I ain't gonna crowd you or nothing. And she's like, fuck no, like hella bitchy. I've never been turned down by somebody like so harshly, like while out traveling. You know, she was very very rude about it, and I was just like, okay, cool. You know, I'm not gonna argue. Or, you know, she is a solo female rider in a very kind of small corridors. You know what I mean? So I understand. Like, I'm not gonna press the issue. So I just start walking back to the rear of the train, and I hope that I could find a car to hop on before this thing starts moving. And when I get back to the first road crossing that the train's blocking, there's a highway patrol sitting right there. And I'm like, oh, he's looking at me like, I know what you're doing, you know? And so I just kind of like go further down on the Bandanas, but then kind of veer off down towards the river. Like, I wasn't doing that. I was just, you know.
Yeah.
And so the train has to just roll on, and I have to let it go. And I'm just like, God damn it, you know? So bummed that she couldn't have maybe just been a little more like understanding of the situation. Or why did she not take one of the Frenchmen up there with her that she knows, and I could have rode with the other dude in the back? You know what I mean? Like, why not that? But at any rate, that's not how it played out. And so I ended up staying in town that night and camped out or whatever. And then the next day, I wake up early and I'm just waiting on my trains, you know, right under the I-5 overpass. And nothing's coming, and I'm just getting kind of tired of waiting. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna go take a nap down by the river. And so I'm just walking down this like kind of steep, loose gravel trail, and I got a real heavy pack on, probably 40 pounds or more, and ridiculous weight on my back. And I don't know why I pack like this. I don't do it anymore. But it was a lot of weight, and my foot I just lost footing, and my foot just kind of rolled over and under me, and when I came down, I mean, I came down right over my foot with I'm a heavy guy anyway, and then all my pack weight, it just right down onto my foot. And with the moment that I landed, I've never broken a bone in my body, but whenever that happened, I was like, that's a break. Like, I know that's a break for sure. So whenever I had to pull my leg out from under myself, and then I just noticed that my foot was dangling kind of sideways, like it wasn't even positioned right at all. Bone was like peeking through the skin at my ankle, you know, and it's just hanging off. And so I just kind of positioned it back in place, which oddly did not hurt all that much.
Really?
It seems like taking the foot and twisting it back the right direction. It was like a 90-degree twist, you know, the wrong way to where it needs to be. And it seems like all of that would have been like excruciating, but there was like little to no pain.
Everything sounds excruciating.
It may have been the adrenaline. I'm not sure, but so I just positioned my foot back in place, and then I had these little boards that I carry around with me. It's kind of like what I use to hitchhike with. It's hard to explain anyway, but they were good little thin boards that I used for splinting, and then wrapped cloth around my leg first, and then rope around those boards, and splinted my my foot really well, and then tried to stand, and that was a fucking joke. It hurt. And so I had to basically drag myself backwards from down by the river where I fell. I had to kind of scoot, and it was like it was July, so it was really fucking hot.
This was Dunsmuir, right?
Dunsmuir, yeah.
I know it. I know that area. That area of gravel and trees between the river and the tracks. Yeah.
The bridge is way high overhead, right?
Yeah.
And there's a little 76 or something, like if you climb up one side. Anyway, or it's a chevron, I think. But so yeah, I'm down there, and just, you know, it took me like 3 hours to scoot myself back to the tracks, even though it wasn't that far. but it was just excruciating pain every little movement. And so I got myself into the shade, and then I'm just kind of sitting there. I wrote a sign that says help or whatever, and I put it up in front of me so that the train crews could see it. And then and I'm sitting there waiting, and finally a fucking train comes, and I'm like, oh my god, perfect. This is like, because I was starting to get worried, because I don't know if there's necessarily mountain lions right there. It's kind of in the city.
Yeah.
Cities. It's like a mountain town. So like, I'm thinking of mountain lions and bears and everything, and I'm just like, God, I'm like, I'm probably putting off the pheromones like of a wounded prey, Pretty fucked. And I was also like, in the 3 or 4 hours that I was down there with the broken leg, I was just screaming help like at the top of my lungs, and nobody could hear me. It was like nobody was around. It just amazed me that many hours no fishermen came by or nobody. I felt really desperate, and I did kind of think I could die. If nightfall comes and there is a mountain lion, I'm done. And so I'm waiting by the tracks, and a train came, and so I'm like, this is fucking wonderful. And so I'm flailing my arms like crazy, and yelling or whatever. But I think the conductor was out of his seat. I think he was packing his bag up to go, because they crew change like 3/4 of a mile past there at the Dunsmuir crew change. So like the rear of the train's always going to park right there. So he's up packing his shit, so he doesn't see me. The engineer's on the other side of the locomotive. I guess somehow he didn't see me, and so I just thought, like, this is the worst. Like I the odds of like a train even coming, like, it's probably once a day, and then they didn't even see me. I'm so fucked, and the train does come to a stop or whatever, and they do the crew change, and it starts to roll again, and I'm just like, motherfucker, man, like this is all bad. And I just started thinking, I wonder if there's maybe a rider, like that would be really awesome if so, And so I'm just looking in any little like cove where that I could spot like where somebody might be. I'm kind of checking out the train, and then down there a ways I see an elbow sticking out, and I'm just like, oh my god, are you kidding me? Like, that is a rider.
That is some incredible fucking luck, dude.
Yeah, and it's still going slow, because they stopped in that block. So when you stop in a block, you can't start and just go 50 miles an hour. You can only go you have to go really slow. So they're like creeping up to the next signal. So they're still going really slow. He has time to get off. Whenever the car gets up to me and I see him, I yell, help, I broke my leg. And he's like on the porch of the grainer, and he just kind of puts his head up against the back wall of the grainer and starts laughing. And I was like, what in the fuck, and I just fell back and I just burst into tears. Like, I'm fucking done. Like, I can't get this train crew to acknowledge me. This rider just laughed at me. And I just laid back, like, so defeated, and started crying, and the train's kind of just rolling around this bend out of sight or whatever with this rider on it. And then I heard him yell, are you serious? He yelled really loud, are you serious? And then I yelled, I'm serious, like, right away, serious. And then I saw his pack fly off the side, and I was like, oh, no way, he's going to do it. And then he jumped off or whatever, and came back, and I introduced myself. I said my name's Jason or whatever, and this is Matt. And he goes, man, I know, I met you last night on the bridge. And it took me back to when I was going to that Chevron, and I hadn't met a rider. It was just the sun was already gone down. It was a little dark, and we were crossing that bridge at the same time. And you just know whenever somebody else is a rider, you can tell by like their gear and stuff. And so I knew that he was a rider, but he was he said, yeah, I'm camping out down here at such and such, and if you want to come hang out or whatever, this is where I'm at. And so I said, yeah, after I hit up the store. So I hit up the store that night, and then I purposely went a totally different place to avoid him, because I typically don't I don't let myself get lured down into places with people that I don't know whenever I'm traveling like that. I'm not gonna, maybe in the daylight, you know what I mean? Maybe a little more lit up place or something, but I'm not just gonna like go down into the bush with some dude I don't know, and
Especially with a probably broken leg.
with the what?
I said especially with a probably broken leg. That's kind of a very great scenario.
No, I'm sorry. Let me back up. This is the night before. This is when I.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he had explained. Hey, whenever I'm sitting there with a broken leg, he's like, "I met you last night on the bridge," and so that takes me back to this memory where I was like meeting him on the bridge.
Yeah.
And he's like, invited me to the camp, and I didn't go there purposely because I don't know if I could trust this guy or not. And then the next day, here I am, and he's my savior. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm really glad he was there. So he helped me out. At first, I gave him all the money that I had, and I gave him my knife. And I said, if you could just try to hack down like some big stabs or something, and maybe I could use them to prop myself up. And he did, and those just didn't work. I think I was so beat up and sore and in so much pain from everything that I'd been through. I didn't even have the strength to like hold myself up on those stabs. So I didn't know how I was going to get out of that canyon. And I said, you know what? I think if you could just like call an ambulance, go to that Chevron and call an ambulance, and hopefully they'll be able to get me out of here. And so that's what he did. He went and hiked out there and called one, and he came back with them, and they put me on it was almost like it was a Stokes ladder. It's like almost shaped like a canoe or something. It wasn't quite a gurney. It's kind of like a gurney, I guess. But and then they lifted it up. There was like 6 of them, and then they put a unicycle wheel under it, and I guess that's how they get people out of like trails or whatever. And so they wheeled me back up to the ambulance and shot me up with fentanyl, and that was pretty cool. And then it got me to the hospital in Mount Shasta City, and then they shot me up with some Dilaudid, and then I was like feeling real nice. Great combination of drugs, and I don't like drugs, but yeah, that was real good right there. And then
what was that dude's name, real quick?
His name was John, and that's all I know about him. Unfortunately, I would love to find him. His name was John.
Did he not go with you to the hospital?
So after I had been, they were setting me up for surgery, and it was, I guess it was about an hour after, they had to do the x-ray and everything, and so they're getting me all prepped up for surgery, and they're like, hey, before you go in, do you feel like a visitor? And I'm like, this is like 400 miles from my hometown. I don't know anybody here really, other than maybe the people at the festival, but they wouldn't have known. So I said, yeah, sure, and John walks in, the guy that helped me out. I guess he had hitchhiked and taken the city bus or something. And
wow.
This way to the, and he brought all the rest of my gear. I basically threw all my gear on the way, just to the side, because I didn't think that I needed it, with a broken
Dude, that kid's a fucking hero, man.
Here's to you, Thomas John. Fucking hell, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, he was
beyond.
And so he and even beyond that, so he sits down with me and he goes, hey man, listen, I was camping in Mount Shasta for like, I don't know how many months, and I finally just decided to go. I was going to go to Roseville, and I just hopped on that train, and I was going out of town after months of being here. But given the situation that you're in, if you want, after you get out of the hospital, I'll take you back to my camp, and I'll make sure that you're at least able to walk around before I leave town again. And so he was going to stay potentially. I wasn't able to walk around for like 3 months. I don't know if he realized how big of a commitment it was that he was offering, but just the fact that he was offering it at all, even if he thought it was going to take a week, like fucking what a guy, Really
oh my god, my little Grinch heart just grew to 3 sizes.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, man.
I wouldn't say that he was like incredibly tall, but it's hard to really tell because I was never standing. I was sitting on my ass on the ground with a broken leg. You know what I mean? I never got to see him compared to my height.
Yeah.
So, but he honestly, he looked like he was like maybe 5'10" or something. Is like my guess, 5'11" tops. But he did have dirty blonde hair, and he had like, he almost had like a It was like a dirty flannel with like cut off sleeves. He had some tattoos on his biceps. You know, he was like probably about 45 or so at the time. He's probably about
Okay.
48 now or something like that. That's all I know, man. I don't know much else about him other than that he said he was going to Roseville 3 years ago, on middle of July. So,
So,
met it,
That sounds
when you guys parted ways at the hospital, were you just like, oh, don't worry about it, man, I'll be okay, and then he just went on his way?
Yeah, I said that was a really awesome thing for him to offer, but I'm sure that I would have family coming to pick me up. And he said okay or whatever. And I was on so many drugs, I honestly don't remember much more about it.
Yeah.
I don't remember, being wheeled into the surgery, wheeled in there for surgery. I don't remember necessarily saying goodbye to him or anything. I just know that he was there and he brought my shit. And then, I may have been so fucked up that maybe I imagined that I hallucinated that. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure, I know they threw my gear to the side. So unless the ambulance brought it, and I was really way out there with hallucinations. But I'm pretty sure, it did happen because I stayed in touch with a nurse friend. Jessica, one of the nurses, she's on my Facebook. We're still friends, and we've talked about this, and that guy showing up and how awesome he was. So he was for sure there.
So it definitely happened.
And,
I believe in the altruism of home bums. It's totally a thing. I'm a home bum. Walk me 2 miles to my apartment in Chicago. Crazy.
Well, it's just nice that people are still good people, Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are nearing about the 2-hour mark, but I don't know if you had any other stories you wanted to tell or, things you wanted to touch on, Jason?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I mean, maybe we missed some. Did we miss any questions or anything here in the chat?
Let's see. Nothing new at the moment. Yep.
Okay. I don't know what else to hit on. I spoke a lot, so does anybody else have anything they want to add or any other questions?
Well, I think
you were in the spotlight, though.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I really just kind of wanted to highlight various people on this show, and I think you've done a really good job of that. I mean, you have some fascinating, awesome stories. I told you before, man, you really need to put pen to paper and do some kind of book or something, because I mean, just the story arc of engineer turned train hopper would be enough to catch anybody's interest, I think. But then throw in some of the really interesting stories you have there, and I'm sure there's a bunch that you might not be thinking about right now, but you'll remember later. And like I said, you'd have a pretty solid book, I think.
Yeah. There's I definitely want to one day. I just feel like I have a little more traveling to do still, a little more adventures that have to fill those pages. There are definitely times that I remember, somebody will maybe tell a story on Spot the Planet or something, and it'll remind me
totally
scenario. That I may have forgotten.
I'm always like, people are like, tell me your craziest story, and I'm like, well, shit, man, I can't. I need something. I need conversation or something to trigger it. If you put me on the spot, I'll just be like, I don't know, like. I mean, I got a couple of go-tos, but
my craziest story will always be the adult baby.
Well, we'll touch on that in your episode. Like next week, I think we're gonna talk to Andy, put Andy on the hot seat here, and have him tell us some crazy stories of their own. But before we go, Jason,
really gay.
Oh yeah, no, you've told me some. I'm utterly fascinated by some of the shit you've told me. That's just completely outside of my world. But they're really good stories. And but I was gonna say, Jason, like, what are your plans now and in the future?
So right now, I'm kind of my mom's not in good health. I'm kind of taking care of her. So kind of like stuck in that situation until things change. And it's hard to really know what's going to happen there. She's very delicate. She died in my passenger seat in January, and somehow I got her to the hospital, and she was dead like 3 minutes, and I got her to the hospital in time that they were able to like get her back. They brought her back with the paddles, and so like she's definitely like fragile, and it could be or she's also tough, so it could be years. I don't fucking know, but basically this is just the chapter that I'm in right now, and I can't really I'm not trying to rush it, you know what I mean, because I do enjoy having her around. So but once things change with this scenario, I really think I'm going to go back to railroad work again. I had a interview for Norfolk Southern about a month ago, and I was actually going to take it and try to put somebody else in charge of taking care of my mom, but that just didn't work out with the person that I had in mind. So I ended up having to kind of not go to that interview, which was really unfortunate. But just getting the invite was nice. So I definitely think I'm going to go back to a railroad at some point. But I think I'm going to try to do it a little differently. I'm not going to. Maybe I won't work I was trying to make too much money last time. I think that made me unhappy. So I think I'm going to work a little less now if I go back. Yeah. So my plan is basically just see what comes of this, and then once I am able to travel again, it may be a long-term move to another state where I can get the job at the railroad. See what happens from there.
Okay. Yeah. Any long-term goals or dreams type of things that you're like, well, that would be nice to do someday?
Yeah, I don't think that I want to just work at the railroad till I die, but I think I'd like to stack up some cash and maybe stay 5 years for the retirement, just to get that started, and then I would like to travel more. Maybe have some kind of vehicle that I could live out of. I think I'd like to kind of van dwell or rubber tramp. You know what I mean? Some kind of those lines. Things fun, because I have a dog, so train hopping is it can be a little difficult, And then she's such a psycho that hitchhikers cool too,
Yeah.
So, I think my own vehicle is about the only way that I can go about it. So, yeah.
Cool. Any chance you're going to be at the Jamboree this year?
I really want to. It's my goal. So I already reserved a rental car because mine won't make it. My car's a piece of shit. So I already have the car reserved. I'm fully planning on doing it. I just, I guess anything can happen. But as it stands, I'm planning on going. So
cool. I'm glad to hear that.
Unless something really shitty happens. It's not far from me. I mean, fuck, come on. How have I missed two already? Or the last two that I wanted to go to were bad anyway. I was actually going to go last year, but a ride that I had fell through, so that wasn't really so much my bad. But yeah, I'm working on making it next year.
Cool. Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining us today, man. Like I said,
sure.
Awesome. I think this is one of the most solid episodes we have so far. Even though it's the second one, but I definitely feel really good about it compared to the way it started out. I had some technical problems, but
honestly, it could have gone worse. Look at me, I'm on the screen. Look at that. Yeah, man.
We're all very thankful for that. But thank you, Andy, for joining us again, and I hope you guys will join us next week. Our plan is to actually, as I mentioned before, talk to Andy about some of the things, life's trials that he's been through. It's very interesting stories.
A lot about sex.
And You've written some interesting stuff too, which I think we should maybe we could plug it in the show notes next episode when we talk to you more about that.
Totally. That'd be awesome.
But yeah. So like I said, thank you, Jason, so much. I appreciate you talking to us for such a long period of time too. I'm sure that I get thirsty like crazy, so I'm glad you bared with us here in all of our questions and everything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This is the end of the episode, and we will see you next Saturday. So until then, everybody, safe travels, and talk to you later.